Hi, I'm Nick Palmisano.
And I'm Matt Finney.
And this is the Bad News Network. New year, new war? The jury is still out, but suffice it to say, President Trump has taken a very different approach to Iran than his predecessors. Before we jump right into the bombing that killed Iran's Qasem Soleimani, I think it's important to lay out all of the events that transpired in advance. On December 27th, a U.S. contractor was killed via rocket attacks from Iran-backed militia group Kataib Hezbollah. On December 29th, the United States retaliated by hitting 3 sites in Iraq and 2 sites in Syria that are affiliated with Hezbollah. On December 31st, protesters backed by Iran attacked the United States Embassy in Baghdad. This is where I want to stop for a second and remind everyone that partisan blinders are a dangerous thing. A number of accounts immediately began tweeting that Trump now had his own Benghazi. Some of those accounts were borderline gleeful, and it really seemed like people wanted Americans to die just so that President Trump would have egg on his face. But this wasn't another Benghazi. It didn't take 13 hours to respond. The United States pushed the QRF immediately and had special operations troops on the ground in 13 minutes. Marine reinforcements followed shortly thereafter. Then, the administration didn't lie about the attacks and claimed that they came about as the result of a video. Additionally, 750 troops from the 82nd Airborne were immediately wheels up in anticipation of additional problems. 4,000 more are on their way shortly. Then, on the president's orders, General Soleimani, who is responsible for Iran's elite military force, probably responsible for hundreds of American deaths and thousands of civilian deaths all across the world, and essentially the vice president of Iran, was killed. Not only was this not like Benghazi, this is essentially the anti-Benghazi. We took immediate, decisive, offensive action that, if anything, was overboard, as opposed to sitting around and waiting for, our men to be hunted and our ambassador to be killed. Put another way, here's a dramatic reinterpretation of Benghazi. And here's what just happened.
CJ!
Does this mean we're going to war with Iran? Did Trump screw everything up? Is this good for America? No one knows. We've been talking about killing Soleimani for years because he's a total piece of human garbage that is bent on destroying America and killing Americans. No one has done it because they feared the repercussions. What repercussions? We will likely see increased attacks overseas. There's a possibility that we'll see domestic terrorism attempts. Iran has promised revenge, and they typically move forward on those promises. But on the other hand, they've been waging a shadow war on us for years, all while killing Americans and trying to develop nuclear technology. I don't think it's an invalid question to ask. Are we better off being a little more overt? Now, I don't know if there's a real strategy. Could Trump be trying to goad them into a clear state-sponsored attack that would greenlight a total war? Or did he just feel like killing the guy and he was tired of beating around the bush? I have no idea. And I don't have a good idea about how all of this is going to play out either. Did we just kick off Iraq Part 2? Is this all going to just fade into memory in a couple of weeks? I don't know. What I do know is that all of the pundits that are either arguing passionately that Trump screwed up or arguing that this was a brilliant maneuver don't know either. This is uncharted territory. Soleimani absolutely deserved to die, and I'm glad he's dead. Whether his death was good or bad for United States foreign policy remains to be seen. To all of you on the ground right now in the Middle East, please stay vigilant. We hope to see you all home safe as soon as possible.
Jack Wilson has been the name on the top of conversation this week. The 71-year-old churchgoer, volunteer security, and former deputy sheriff saved the lives of hundreds of churchgoers. A mentally unstable man, who we'll just call Loser, pulled out a shotgun during service. He killed 2 members of the church at point-blank range and turned to do so on the rest of the congregation when he was felled by a single shot. That shot came from hero Jack Wilson, who fired a single shot at 50 feet, striking Loser in the head and putting him down and putting an end to his reign of violence. The entire exchange started and ended in a matter of seconds. As Loser dropped, half a dozen more churchgoers were drawing their weapons and were closing in on Loser in case additional aid was needed. It was not. The reporting on this event has been particularly interesting, as expected. Pro-gun supporters have heralded Jack Wilson as a hero and a shining example as why good guys with guns is the only means of stopping evil guys with guns. Many have been quick to point out that with the proposed anti-gun laws of Democrats, the entire congregation would be rendered defenseless and we would be mourning the lives of many more churchgoers. Anti-gun supporters have voiced their opinions as well. They're stating that events like this are exactly why guns need to be more heavily regulated and/or banned entirely. The media, for its part, has done the bare minimum on reporting on this event, and anti-gun lawmakers and pundits have been noticeably silent. No matter how you lean politically, we should all be able to universally agree that Jack Wilson is a tried and true hero. He reportedly runs a small tactical training course, which we have no doubt will be seeing a surge in applications. Rightly so.
You know, I want to hit one more thing on that story, Matt, because the way all of this has gone down has really aggravated me. Had that guy not been there to stop this, the media would be absolutely loving this story. Had a bunch of people died, this would have been a feast for gun control stories. But it wasn't. It played out exactly how guns rights advocates have been saying it would play out for years. It played out the same way it's played out many times before, on stories that are always buried and never brought into the limelight. And as soon as there was a good guy with the gun, the story was virtually buried by the mainstream media. People even wrote stories for USA Today, no less, that the real scary part of all this was that there were 6 other guys that stood up and drew weapons, and we didn't know anything about these people, and they could have all been shooters themselves. Really? Many more people chimed in that Jack was totally different from your average gun owner because he was a sheriff's deputy. Yeah, during the Reagan administration. And back then he was a reserve deputy. And the drills that he runs are the same drills that lots of guys run. I run those drills. Matt runs those drills. I'm not saying that everybody is the kind of shooter that Jack is, but a lot of people train for these incidents. The idea that lots of people wouldn't make good decisions with guns is frankly crazy. And I don't think there's a better incident that shows that than this one. There were 8 people, 7 men and 1 woman, that drew their weapons. The first man was killed as he attempted to draw his weapon as the loser drew his. The second man was Jack Wilson. He cleared his fields of fire, fired 1 shot, and ended the incident. The other 5 men and 1 woman did not fire because they had not yet cleared their fields of fire, even though they had a shot on the target. So 8 people did the right thing, and 7 people waited, even though their lives were potentially on the line, to make sure that there was nobody in their line of sight before pulling the trigger. Not a single person shot erratically, even under high stress. That is exactly what you're supposed to do. Loser wasn't allowed to own a weapon legally. He got one anyway. Loser wasn't allowed to have a sawed-off shotgun even if he was allowed to have a weapon. He had one anyway. 8 legal gun owners did the right thing. Loser died. That's a hell of a story. You can tell that story and still feel that there should be more gun laws. But you owe it to these people to tell that story. When you're a media outlet and you opt, instead of telling that story, to do a bunch of yeah, but, you're just being intellectually dishonest. If those 8 people weren't there, a lot of people in that church would have died. Why isn't Jack on Ellen? Why aren't they all on Ellen? Why aren't they on every show? These people are heroes. Switching gears, an anti-Semitic piece of garbage, Grafton Thomas, attacked a whole bunch of people on Hanukkah with a machete. Immediately in the wake of the attacks, people were talking about how this was all President Trump's fault and it was due to white nationalism. Turns out the guy was black, and he's either a black Hebrew Israelite or crazy, or both. All of a sudden, the media just goes silent. A lot of people talk about how President Trump has ruined the media. And I'll be honest, I don't like his moniker fake news. I think that when you start using fake news and people start being comfortable with it, they get to decide what's real and what's not based on their own worldview. And I think that's really dangerous. But it is the media itself that is selecting which stories we hear. It's the media that's choosing the narrative. Why can't we say, regardless of my beliefs on guns, Jack is a hero? Why can't we say anti-Semitism is an abomination even when it comes from a black guy? If you guys just told the truth, told the story, presented the facts, we wouldn't have to do BNN every week. It isn't Trump making the news fake. President Trump certainly has his share of sins, but making the news fake isn't one of them. That's on you guys.
Kim Jong Un hinted in a Christmas gift for America that would be revealed in his end-of-the-year speech. January 1st came and went, however, and no speech was delivered. Instead, a readout of Un's address to various party leaders was read out on state TV. Some analysts believe this may be to soften the delivery of the address. In it, Un stated that there will never be a denuclearization policy moving forward. He also announced that the world will witness a new strategic weapon in the near future. By avoiding speaking this himself, it would seem less like he was getting up there and issuing threats to the world. Others have stated that it would avoid him getting up there and saying that he screwed up a bunch in the past. Either way, the Hermit Kingdom is still issuing threats and the world seems generally less interested. Trump, however, has stated that he still remains hopeful that they'll reach a deal, but says that it might be a Pyong way off.
Illinois became the 11th state to legalize marijuana this week, and they look forward to puff passing that to the next state.
Kentucky Republican Representative Thomas Massie thinks that many law enforcement officials will be willing to go to jail rather than enforce unconstitutional Second Amendment laws. If I was a betting man, I'd say you're on the right track, Congressman. Somebody is going to jail, Massie said, and it's probably going to be a public official. And God bless the public officials who are willing to do this in the stead of their constituents.
New York passed a bail reform bill that allows criminals not only to walk out of court without bail, but walk away from the crime scene as well. As is the case of Tiffany Harris, who allegedly assaulted 3 Jewish women by beating them and shouting obscenities at them. She walked without bail that very day. A day later, she assaulted another Jewish woman in that same location. All of this is due to bail reforms pushed by Democrats that allow people to walk without bail for misdemeanors and most nonviolent felonies, even where someone dies. Additionally, the new reform allows criminals to even inspect their own crime scenes. Had someone break into your home or steal something right where you live, well, they now have the right to go in there and inspect your place. If you don't let them, you can be charged. Oh, and also, a list of people that are going to testify has to immediately be handed to the criminal. Bang up job, New York.
A tweet from a British lawyer claimed that he killed a fox trying to kill his chickens with a baseball bat while wearing his wife's kimono. How that fox got into his wife's kimono, we'll never know.
And finally, in Florida Man news, Florida Man has made a New Year's resolution to be better this year and never to again land on the pages of various newspapers across the world. Just kidding, he's getting worse. Police received a call from a resident in Southeast Browley Terrace that there was a strange man making noises in their backyard with a flashlight. When police arrived at the call, they eventually found Donald Watts completely naked and covered with mud in a ditch. He was pacing back and forth and making his best effort to sound like a bird. When police approached him, he began to run and slipped under the porch of a mobile home nearby. Eventually, Watts decided to fake compliance and come out. He began to punch one of the deputies repeatedly, while the other deputy tasered Watts twice to no effect. Watts ran off into the night. Deputies then waited for the K-9 cavalry to arrive. Once the cavalry did arrive in the form of a fearless K-9 named Casper, along with 5 additional deputies, they found Watts not very far away in the woods. This time he was on all 4s, still naked and covered with mud, but now growling like a dog. Casper was unleashed and the dogfight began. Watts leaped at Casper and bit his ear and attempted to try to choke the dog. But Casper freed himself because he's a badass canine dog and bit Watts' whole head. Like, here's your head, here's Casper, he's got your whole head. As Casper dragged him back by the head, Watts continued to fight, screaming and spitting at the deputies. He was eventually taken into custody and brought to the hospital to treat his multiple dog wounds and to clean the mud off of himself. God bless Florida. And with that, I'm Nick Palmisano.
And I'm Matt Finney.
And this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already, and you know what? Forget it. I ran out of puns.